Today's topic is trouble. I've seen lots of trouble in my classrooms. As a student, was involved in some trouble, and so I want to kind of focus on trouble in the classrooms, trouble in school, and out of school, on the way to school, trouble. All right, I want to start with a couple of things that are legendary. I have no verification that these stories are true. I just want to be upfront with that. Everything else that I've talked about, I was an eyewitness to. And so I know that they actually occurred. These two, however, I'm not so sure, but they're worthwhile telling. They became legendary. One was at Holy Cross when I was a student. When I was a student there, and it involved a guy who was a year ahead of us, graduated in 1971, and it involved Brother Carl Demond. Here's a photo of Brother Carl. Now, Brother Carl spoke with a bit of a lisp. So the legend has it that he had a student up at the board to write vocabulary words that he would give them on the board, and then they would have to write the definition of the vocabulary word. And one of the vocabulary words was pithy, which is a little difficult to say if you have a lisp. So Brother Carl told the student to put on the board the word pithy. So the kid writes on the board Pissy, pissy. And Brother Carl, as the legend has it, goes a little bit nuts and starts screaming, "Not pithy, pithy." Class is laughing, and Brother Carl does what the brothers generally did when classes got a little bit out of control. He just lashed out, and this kid caught a beating. But it was it was a funny story nonetheless. Did that actually happen? I don't know, but could very well have. Another legendary story that I heard about when I started teaching in the New York City public schools. I think that Myron Moskowitz might have been the one who told me this story. I'm not certain either. But the story goes that a teacher in a New York City public high school, his class was unruly and it was getting to him. So he climbs on top of the radiator, the heater, which was in front of the windows in this kind of standard New York City public high school classroom. So he climbs up on top of that, and that's about 4 feet or so high. And he grabs the cord for the blinds, and he wraps it around his neck like a noose. And he says to the class, "If you don't start behaving properly, I'm going to jump. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to jump." And so, what do New York City high school students do when they're confronted with such a situation? They all start chanting, "Jump, jump, jump." And so, the teacher, who was literally at the end of his rope, jumps. And as he jumps, what happens? The blinds go up. So he's standing on the floor with the cord around his neck. The blinds are up. The kids are hysterically laughing. Did this actually happen? Again, I don't know, but it may well have. All right, now let's talk about things that I know occurred because either I was the troublemaker or I was the teacher uh, in the classroom. And as I go through this, I'm going to start when I was a student at Holy Cross and talk about how I tried to avoid trouble. Well, good thing to do, right? Avoid trouble, but not necessarily by not misbehaving, but by figuring out how you get away with it. How do you avoid the sanction and still have the fun associated with misbehaving? So, at first, I was not very successful at this. And I can recall one instance in freshman year where I was kind of fooling around with one of the brothers, and I thought that we were just kind of fooling around. He didn't think we were fooling around. He was getting angry, and I thought he was just kidding. So, bottom line, I get sent to detention. So I go to detention, and I have to sit in detention for an hour. This is Brother Francis Ellis was the dean at the time, and I had a right today, and I've never forgotten this. Today is June 6th, 1969, the 25th anniversary of D-Day. I had to write that for an hour, nonstop. And I kind of resolved at that point that I would never end up in detention again. But to this day, I know June 6th, 1969. And when I became a dean myself at Holy Trinity High School, when I had to have kids serving detention, I would try to make that detention fruitful and educational. So, depending on the kids' transgression, they would have to do something like write the Declaration of Independence or write the Bill of Rights, or if they were really bad, they had to write the entire Constitution. So I would do things like that. But June 6th is the anniversary of D-Day. So I got in trouble there. Sophomore year, I'm in Latin class with I wasn't a good student in high school, and in Latin class I was especially not good. So they took the 20 worst Latin students from freshman year, and they put us all in the same classroom. Guy I mentioned previously, Blaise Pascal, he was in that classroom. My friend Rich Ramirez, he was in that classroom, and Brother Gilroy was the teacher. Here's a photo of Brother Gilroy. One of the first things we had to do in sophomore Latin was we had to memorize the Hail Mary in Latin, the Ave Maria. And every day class would begin, we would stand up and we would, as a class, recite the Ave Maria. Now, the first week or so, Brother Gilroy would lead us in the Ave Maria, and he would speak in a very booming voice. He would recite the Ave Maria, which is a very short recitation. I'm going to recite it for you, not from memory, but from my notes. Ave, and he would do it like this, Brother Gilroy. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Jesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in ore mortis nostrae. Amen. It wasn't that difficult to memorize. So we had to do this. So he would lead us, like I say, that first week or so. And then about the middle of the second week, September, he starts us off and he's doing his loud, booming voice. And then he stops. And this is what he hears. He hears, we're all just mumbling. Nobody knew it. Nobody bothered to memorize it. No one. And he went predictably nuts. I don't remember what the punishment was he gave us, but I'm sure there was a price. There was a price to pay for mumbling through. So I kind of got in trouble there as well, although no detention for that. Probably just some extra homework, which we probably didn't do. Anyway, now I began to figure out how to get away with stuff. And one of the things that we did, all of us, I shouldn't say all of us, a good percentage of us at Holy Cross, we took the bus to school, regular city buses. As I mentioned last time, I took the Q76. Others took the Q16, depending on where you were coming from. There was also the Q31, so there was a couple different bus lines. But most of the kids took the 76. And what we like to do when it started, if it started to snow while we were waiting for the bus, that was usually the signal that head to the diner, get breakfast, go to school late, and tell them that the buses weren't running on schedule. They were late or what have you. Now the school knew about Jay's Diner, which was on the corner of Hillside Avenue and Francis Lewis, and that's where a lot of guys went. They went to Jay's Diner, and occasionally Brother Ellis would grab one of the school vans, drive down to Jay's Diner, go in and round them up, and throw them into the van and take them back to school, and of course they'd all be in trouble. There was another spot in Main Street, Flushing, where guys who took the 7 train or lived in Flushing and walked over to Main Street to get to 16. There was a place that they would congregate, and the school knew about it, and they would go and occasionally round up the kids that were there. But my friends and I went to a place called the Moon Diner. Here's where the Moon Diner was located. This was the first stop for the Q76. It was Triangle Park on Hillside Avenue around 175th Street, as you can see on that map. Across from the bus stop was a little diner called the Moon Diner that no one knew about. Just the people who lived in the neighborhood knew about this diner. And we would go there and we would hang out there for whatever, hour, whatever it was, have coffee, maybe some eggs or something. And then we get on the bus and we go to school. And invariably what the guys on the bus would say to me, Tony, you gotta talk to them at the office. You talk to them because they'll listen to you. Listen to me. In any case, I would, and I would say, the bus wasn't stopping. It wasn't coming on time, and they would say, no, that's not true. Everybody else was getting to school on time, and I would say, brother, you know, we get on the bus at Triangle Park, which is the first and last stop of the 76, and sometimes when it's snowing, they don't come all the way down. They turn around at 179th Street, which is where most people get on the bus. And so, we got to wait before the bus comes down to us. And they would always buy it. It was golden. So that's how we went to school late on days where it snowed. I mean, all we needed was a couple of flakes to come down, and we were in the Moon Diner. I also figured out when I was in high school, around, I guess it was around junior year, how to cut school and never get caught. The rule at Holy Cross was, when we were there, was if you were absent, one of your parents had to call the school the first day, the day that you were absent, the first day, and then they wouldn't have to call again unless you were going to be out more than 5 days. Then they'd have to call again. And when you returned to school, you had to bring a note signed by your parent explaining why you were absent. So my mom always told me that, you write the note and I'll sign it. Okay, fine. So I did that, and then I kind of figured out what I could do is, if I was absent, let's say on a Tuesday, I would say, dear so and so, please excuse my son. He was absent from school on Tuesday. The beginning of a line on Tuesday, and then sincerely, and then my mother would sign it, and then I would put comma Wednesday and Thursday. So now I got 2 free days. It worked. It worked like a charm, and we would use this. I didn't abuse it, but we would do this a couple times a year. I think my buddy Chris also used this same technique, and it worked. It worked, really well. So that's how I kind of avoided trouble. Another thing I did, to this day I don't understand how either of these things work, but they did, and it was when Robert Larkin was the dean. Here's a picture of Mr. Larkin, and senior year, last period, I was taking trigonometry, and I hated it. I hated it. I think my buddy Chris might have been in that class too, although I can't swear to that, but I'm pretty sure he was. And the way attendance was taken in those days, the teacher would have a little card and would write the names of the absent kids on the card. Then there was a little spot on the outside of the door where you would slip the card, and then either Larkin himself, or typically it was a kid who was doing service for him or something, would come around and pick up those cards and then bring them to Larkin, and then that's how he'd know who was absent. You check it against the master list, you see who cut classes and so forth. And what we did for a long period of time is we would just come by, duck down, grab that card, cross our names off, put the card back in, and take off. And we never got caught. We never got caught. I just, he must have been that he didn't work with the card. I don't know, but we never got caught. It worked like a charm. We didn't have to go to last period class. That was senior year. Also in senior year, in the fall, I had mono, and so I was out for like 2 weeks. And when I went back, the doctor gave me a note saying I should not uh, go to gym class. I should be excused from participating in gym for, I forget how long, the doctor said. So I brought that into the office, and Larkin looked at it, and then he kind of signed it, and he put OK Ral, Robert A. Larkin, OK Ral, on a note, or on that note. I had to show it to my gym teacher. I showed it to my gym teacher. Never went to gym again in senior year. Never went to gym again. It was golden, and I never got in any trouble. Gym was first period. Trigonometry was last period. I shortened I shortened my day quite a bit, but it for some reason these things worked. So that was good. So that's how I kind of tried to avoid some trouble when I was in school. Other people used other techniques that didn't really work. A friend of mine, Tommy, he wanted to cut school with me and Chris one day, and we had our absence notes. He had nothing, and what he said was, "All you got to do, Tony, is just call my school." He went to school in the city, Loyola, I think was the name of the school. "Just call my school, tell them you're my father, and then I'm going to be absent for this day." I said, "Tom, that is not going to work. There's no way that's going to work. I called from a payphone in the subway, so you could hear the trains." I said, "Tommy, this is not going to work." "Yeah, no, it'll work." So I call, and of course, as soon as I get off the phone with whoever I spoke with at Loyola, they immediately called Tom's father. So he got into major trouble. You had to use the right technique. All right, now let's fast forward to when I am teaching. And one of the things we have to be concerned with, of course, in terms of kids getting in trouble, is when they cheat on exams. So I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios, and I'll tell you how I handle them. But I want you to think about how you might handle it, or how you think that I did handle it. So one of the scenarios is, and these are actual things that happened. The very first test I ever gave I was at Dominican Commercial High School, the old girls Catholic high school. And I was amazed that I had this power. All these kids are sitting, these girls sitting there, they're taking the test, and just I gave it. It was an amazing kind of a thing. But I'm in the front of the room, sitting, leaning against the desk, watching the kids, make sure nobody's looking at anybody else's paper. And the girl in front of me raises her hand. She has a question, but on her hand she had cheat notes written on her hand. So how do you handle that? That was the first time. That was like my first major test as a teacher, how do you handle this? So the kid had the notes, script notes, written right on her hand, and she put it pretty much right in my face. St. Mary's, I'm giving my first test at St. Mary's, and I gave every other row a different version of the test to avoid cheating. So this one kid, I'll never forget him, Kevin Larkin, a really nice kid, but he wore bangs, and he would kind of look, and you couldn't hardly see his eyes from under the bangs. And it's toward the end of the period, he had already finished his test, and he just blurts out, says, "Hey, he's got a different test than me." That's right. That's right, Kevin. So what do? He's looking at the other kids. He's looking at the other kids' paper. Uh, Also at St. Mary's, I would give quizzes, 10-question quizzes, oral quizzes, based on the previous night's reading assignment. It's usually a combination of multiple of true false questions and fill-ins. Usually 8 true false, 2 fill-ins. And oftentimes there'd be like a pattern to the answers just to make it easier for me to mark. And I noticed, because it's pretty obvious, that the kids who were taking the quiz in the afternoon had gotten the answers from the kids in the morning, because the difference between the morning grades and the afternoon grades was kind of stark. And there was a lot of kids in the afternoon class who were getting everything right, and I knew that they were getting the answers from the kids in the morning class. So what do you do in that situation? And then I had another kid who at August Martin, and I got to tell you, at August Martin, the kids basically didn't cheat. The kids I taught at Newtown, they didn't cheat. And the reason that they didn't cheat is because they really didn't care about their grades. So why bother cheating if you don't really care about your grades? Just take the test, whatever you get, who cares? So I then became of the opinion that I would rather teach in a school where cheating was a problem than in a school where cheating wasn't an issue, because in the school where cheating was the problem, you had kids who cared about their grades. They weren't ethical, but they cared about their grades. And I could deal with that better. So I had one kid at August Martin, a little girl, who would always just blatantly copying off the kid next to her. So what do you do in that situation? All right, so let's go back, and I'll tell you how I handled these different situations that I was confronted with, and see if you kind of would have done it the same way, or maybe you figured this is the way I would have done it. The girl with the answers on her hand, she should have gotten a 0, but I didn't know what to do. I was kind of flustered when I saw her, so I just said, "Hey, that's not right. Go to the bathroom, wash your hands, and come back in and finish the test." So I gave her no penalty at all. I just made her go wash her hands so she wouldn't have the answers on her hand. That was it. I didn't handle that particularly well. The kid, Kevin Larkin, looking at the paper next to him and blurting out, "Hey, that's a different test." I didn't do anything to that kid. I just laughed and explained that you're not cheating in my class because I have this different system. But again, no trouble for Kevin Larkin. Now the afternoon morning quiz answers flowing. Here's the way I handle that. The next quiz I gave, I didn't change the questions, but I changed the order in which I asked the questions. And I kept the first question, was a true false statement. I kept that the same, and then I set it up so that the next 3 answers would all be the same. So that maybe the first 4 ones were all true, and then I had 2 fill-ins, and then I had the next 4 would be false, which makes it really easy to grade, by the way. That's why I did it that way. So what I did with the afternoon kids is I left the first one true, and then the next three were false. I inverted the order of the fill-ins, and then the last four were all true. So if you just simply took the answers from the kids in the morning and put those down as your answers in the afternoon, you're going to get one right. And these were 20-point quizzes. You'd get a 2 out of 20. And sure enough, worked like a charm. I had a whole bunch of kids in that afternoon class who got 2 out of 20, and there's nothing they could say. I didn't have to say anything, because they knew that I knew, and if they want to play that game, I'm happy to play that game too. And so never had a problem again with the morning and the afternoon quizzes, the answers flowing. I also yelled at the kids in the morning about passing answers on, because that's cheating too. I gave them the whole spiel. I used the same technique with the girl at August Martin. I just gave her a test with a different order of questions. She copied off the kid next to her, and she ended up with like a 10 out of 100 or something. And I don't even think it bothered her. Tell you the truth, she didn't really care one way or the other. In any event, so that's kind of the way I like to keep things on the up and up as best I can. Because if you accuse a kid of cheating on a test, I mean, you gotta have evidence. You gotta be able to prove it. I mean, it becomes a whole thing. You're impugning the integrity of the kid and so forth. You don't have solid evidence, yada yada yada. So I'd rather just do it this way. Let them do what they do, and then nail them that way. The effect is the same, without all the aggravation. Uh, move on to a different topic. Also at St. Mary's, one of the things that we did at St. Mary's was field trips. Every June, I think it was, right after Memorial Day, I'm pretty sure there would be a day that would be field trip day, and there'd be one field trip that would go to, like, an amusement park, and a whole bunch of teachers would go. That was the most popular trip. Almost all the kids would go. But we were encouraged to come up with our own field trip. I didn't really want to go to the amusement park. I didn't want to get on. I think it was Great Adventure. I didn't want to get on a bus to go to New Jersey and deal with all that. So I arranged for a trip to the Queens County Courthouse on Supton Boulevard in Jamaica. I was teaching at St. Mary's, which was a short walk to the Long Island Railroad. And then you could take the Long Island Railroad right to Supton Boulevard in Jamaica, and then the courthouse was like a 2 or 3 block walk north on Supton Boulevard. And I had about a dozen kids signed up to go to the courthouse, all freshmen, all kids that were in my classes. So after it was all arranged, I'm thinking to myself, now I'm taking 12 kids. We got to get on the Long Island Railroad. That's no problem. But when we get off the Long Island Railroad, it's kind of congested at that part of Jamaica. With downtown Jamaica, I got to keep these kids together. This could be a problem. My kids disappear, cut out on the trip and go do something else or what have you. So I knew I had to be vigilant. Well, I didn't have to be vigilant, because these kids were petrified of going to Jamaica. These are kids, for the most part, from Manhasset. Uh, and so we get off the train. It's like the mother duck with the little ducklings. They're all stayed tight, and they're tight together, staying as close to me as they could, because they were afraid. They were afraid of what could happen to them in Jamaica. We get to the courthouse, and of course you have to go through a metal detector. This is 1980, must be, yeah, June of 1980, and you got to go through a metal detector in order to enter the courthouse. So we're going through the metal detector, and one of the cops, or court security, whatever they're called, comes over to the group, says, "Who's in charge of this group?" And I said, "I am." It was 1980, so what was I, 25 at the time? Uh, and he looks at me, he says, "You're in charge?" Yeah, yeah, I'm in charge. He says, "Okay." He said, "Come here a minute." He said, one of your kids came through and he was carrying a knife. It was a little like pen knife, but he had a knife. So we can't let him in with the knife. He says, now, if you want, we could put him in a holding cell and we could just leave him there, while you're doing your thing, and then you could pick him up at the end, and it'll really teach him a lesson. I said, well, let me take a look at where you're going to put him. So I go look, and it's a holding cell at the Queens County Courthouse in Jamaica. So you got all these really unsavory characters, let's say. I said, this is a little kid, a little 14-year-old boy. I said, no, let's not. I said, I'll take the knife, or you hang on to the knife. I'll pick it up. I'll pick it up when we leave, and I won't give it back to him, and I'll let him know that you can't do stuff like that. And so I wasn't going to put the kid. He would have peed himself, I think. So that was a little bit of trouble at the courthouse. Now, lateness to class is another thing that kids could get in trouble for. At St. Mary's, you had to be in your seat when the bell rang, or else you were late. And if you were late, a teacher could send you down to the office, and you would get a late detention, and you have to spend a half hour in detention after school. Late detention. Consequently, the bell would ring. The kids were in the room in their seats, and that was that. I go from St. Mary's to Newtown, and the first day I'm at Newtown, I'm going to my first class, and I get there, the bell rings, and there had to be a 1,000 kids still in the hallway. It's a school of about 5,000 kids. There had to be 1,000 or more kids that were still in the hallways, and I was like, how in the world do I deal with this? And so kids, for the most part, would get to class on time or relatively on time, so it was no issue. But one kid, I remember, came in a couple minutes late one time in September, and I told him, go get a late pass. And he looked at me like I had four heads. When am I going to get a late? I said, I don't care where you get a late pass. You can't come into class late. Go get a late pass. So he went down to the security desk. Security guard wrote him a pass, and he brought it to me. And I said, fine, that's fine. And, you know, didn't make a whole lot of sense, but the kid didn't come to class late again. So that kind of worked out. At uh, Townsend Harris, in the new building, as I mentioned before, there was 6 floors. So kids who were in gym had to go up 6 flights if they had a class on the 6th floor after gym, which would not really be a good thing to do from a programming perspective. Give a kid a gym class followed by a class on the 6th floor. But in any case, they did that, at least to this one particular kid. So I'm ready to start my class. Remember, no bells. I'm ready to start my class. And in comes this girl, freshman girl. I forget who it was. But she came running into the room. She sits down, she's all out of breath, she's huffing and puffing, she's perspiring heavily. Her face was completely flushed. If she was 50 years old, I would think she was having a heart attack. I mean, it was really awful. And I said, "What's the matter?" I didn't know what was wrong with her. And she told me she just ran up 6 flights of stairs after gym class because she didn't want to be late for class. And I said, "Well, no, you can't." I said, "Look, you are never, ever to come to this class after gym on time. You're to take your time coming up the stairs. I don't want you running up the stairs." And she was like surprised. Never heard that before. Teacher telling her, don't come to class on time. Because it was just an absurdity. Either they didn't let them out of gym early enough, or whatever the case was. But this poor kid, I thought she was gonna collapse. So that was lateness to class at Townsend Harris, which was always a kind of an interesting thing because we really didn't have bells for the most part. Now, when I get to Jericho High School, my second year there, my research program took hold, and I had my own classrooms, computer lab set up with tables in the center, computers around the perimeter of the room. It was a really nice room. And I was in there all day, and kids, for the most part, were working on projects. So it wasn't your standard class, kids sitting in rows, listening to you, discussing, taking notes. They were working independently on different projects or in groups on different projects. So I had particular rules for that, for that room that I needed to be followed. And the kids thought some of the rules were kind of funny. And one group of students, a bunch of boys, these guys were terrific. They were just terrific. The kids at Jericho were great. So they codified my rules. They printed them up, a list of rules, and they put on top of it the emblem of the 266 rules. Is a photograph of that emblem. I've kept the emblem, but I don't have the list. But on that list would be rules that were maybe unique to the room. No whistling, no singing, no sitting on the tables, no food or drink at the computers, things of this sort. And so kids would get, no leaning back in your chair, all sorts of stuff like that. And the kids thought they were the funniest things. And I had a number of kids who I taught in research, and kids in research I had, for the most part, I had them for 4 years. They would say, "We're going to come in one day and we're going to break all the rules at once. We're going to lay across a table. We're going to put our feet up. We're going to be eating. We're going to be whistling. We're going to be singing." Of course, they never did, but those are my rules, the 266 rules. Now, at also at Jericho, uh, at the end of a semester, teaching seniors. It's the last day of semester. There's no Regents exam. It's either an economics class or a sociology class. We just kind of sit around and we would, talk and fool around and so forth. And at one of those classes, I was the victim of what I called a drone strike. Yeah, a drone strike. A girl who was sitting at the tables directly across from me, she made a paper airplane and she threw it. And the airplane went up and it looped and it came and boom, it hit me right between the eyes. She was like, "Oh my God, Mrs. Scarnati, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." So, what do you do when a student hits you in the face with a paper airplane? I don't know what you would do, but I know what I did. I picked up a rubber band and I shot her from across the room, and I shot her right in the head with the rubber band. So I responded to the drone strike with a rubber band counter strike. So that was I think that was an economics class at Jericho. Now, also at Jericho, uh, I had a student, a boy, senior, who got himself into a bit of trouble. I had one of the assignments I gave them. They had to find a news article. They had to put it into, there's a sociology class, into the sociological perspective and so forth. And the rule was they had to come to, when they came to class the day it was due, they had to bring in two copies, one that they would hold on to, one they would give to me, because I would kind of at random call on people to talk about their articles, and I'd like to have it in front of me, their write up, so I could, you know, correct things, participate things, help them if they started to stumble a little bit. I could tell them what they wrote, that kind of thing. So, first two assignments, this kid didn't hand them in. So I see him. I say, "Hey, the first two assignments you didn't hand in. This is like 25% of your grade." He said, "I emailed them to you because I told them that if they were going to be absent, or if there was a problem with their printer, that they could email it to me." So he said he emailed them to me. I said, "No, I never got them in my email." He said, well, I emailed them to you. I said, no problem. When you go home this afternoon, go into your sent emails, find the 2 assignments that you sent me. You must have sent them to the wrong address. I said, check the email address. I told them what it was again. They had that in print as well. And then resend it. And when you resend it, I'll see the date that it was originally sent. If it was the right date, there's no penalty, because it was just a simple error. So, oh, okay, good, good, good. So days pass. I get nothing from him. I reminded him. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'll get it right to you. Okay, so I knew the kid is lying. I know he didn't do it. So this is in the fall semester. So first marking period comes to an end in the fall semester, and he gets a poor grade. Now this is around Thanksgiving ish, and we had parent conferences the day before Thanksgiving at Jericho. You had 2 days of parent conferences. The first one was an evening where you would invite parents to come in who you wanted to speak to, which I really never wanted to do. And then the next day, the day before Thanksgiving, we wouldn't have classes. We'd have a half a day, and in the morning, any parent who wanted to see any teacher could just come in. So, and hardly anybody would come in, but in walks this kid with his mother and his father, and they come in, and I'm looking at mom. Mom is steaming. She is angry, and I'm thinking, oh God, what she's gonna complain about the kid's grade? Got to be kidding me. Didn't hand in those 2 assignments. So I'm not too concerned, but what is she going to say? They sit down. I had tables set up. I'm on one side. I got 3 chairs set up on the other side of the table. Narrow table. And so mom sits in the middle. She's got her husband on one side. She's got her son on the other. And she introduces herself and she says, Mr. Scarnati, do you know how you can tell that a teenager is lying? And before I had a chance to answer, she said, his lips are moving. I was like, okay, so now I'm off the hook. she's not angry at me. She's angry at him for lying. And so we had this little conversation about honesty and so forth. And I'm talking to him about integrity and all this stuff. I'm giving mom what mom wants. She wants me to lecture this kid in front of her. So I do. Dad was just sitting there like shaking his head, and and the kid just hung his head in shame. How can you tell a teenager is lying? His lips are moving. So, that was Jericho. Couple of stories from Jericho. Now, if we go back to Townsend Harris, uh, while we were still in the old building, senior classes were on the campus, and I taught a couple of senior classes, and I would meet them on the campus. So this was now, I think we were coming up to like the day before Christmas break, or maybe Easter break, or the February break, one of the many breaks that we get. It's one of the main reasons why I became a teacher. In any event, uh, I'm telling the kids that tomorrow, I want to tell them that you don't really have. I'm going to cancel it because it's the day before a break, and we completed what we needed to complete. So I tell them, I said, look, tomorrow, I'm not going to be bringing my Delaney book with me. For those of you who don't know, I kept one. This is a Delaney book. The Delaney book was used in New York City public schools, and I used them when I was at St. Mary's as well, because I was trained with these when I was student teaching. These are used for attendance, and I used them for not only for attendance, but I used them to keep their grades on as well. Delaney books had these little slots in them, and you had these little cards. So if a kid is present, there's the card. If the kid is absent, you turn the card over, and these are dates, and you would circle the date that the kid was absent. So I told the students at Townsend House, I said, look, I'm not going to be bringing my Delaney book to class with me tomorrow, so I won't be taking attendance. Ah, so it's Townsend Harris. Kid raises her hand. Does that mean we don't have to come to class tomorrow? I said, well, I can't tell you not to come to class tomorrow. I can only tell you that I won't be taking attendance. So now she's like, well, I don't understand. If you're not going to take attendance, do we have to come? And one of the boys in the back of the room says, no, you don't have to come. That's what he's telling you. You don't have to come tomorrow. Oh. So bright kids, but sometimes a little slow on the uptake. But they always aimed to please the Townsend Harris, the Townsend Harris kids. Now the last story about trouble I'll tell you was the Townsend Harris class of 1999. 95% sure that was the class. I went to their reunion, their fifth. I'm fairly certain it was their fifth reunion. So they had been out of Townsend Harris for 5 years. Almost all of them had already graduated college, and they were starting their careers, or they were in graduate school, law school, what have you. And so I spent some time at the reunion, and was at a place in the city. I forget the name of it might have been Playwrights, in a room upstairs, whatever. So I'm at there. I'm having a very very nice time, reminiscing with the kids. And then I leave and I come down the stairs, and then you go right out the door. And there was a group of about 6 or 7 of the alumni, uh, and they were smoking cigarettes, because you can't smoke inside in those days. This was 2004, I guess. You can't smoke inside, so you got to smoke outside. So they're all smoking cigarettes. They see me, and what do? They hide their cigarettes. I stopped laughing. You're hiding your cigarettes. I said, that's it. Referrals for all of you. I thought it was the cutest thing. They're still afraid of getting in trouble. Although it was me, I never gave a kid a referral at Townsend Harris, or really anywhere else. I never sent kids down, for discipline. I always felt that when you sent a kid out for discipline, sent him to the office, or what have you, you were admitting to administration that you can't handle your class, and you need their help. So I always avoided that in any case. Uh, so that was a little bit about trouble uh, in the schools that I've been in as a student, and then later as a teacher. Okay, we're rapidly coming to the end of this project. I will have one more for sure. So you'll see me next time. Oh, I want to point out one thing. You might have noticed in my background I have family pictures, and I have a new one here. That's my son, who, according to Eileen Marcus, gets his good looks from his mother. And that's my newest granddaughter. That's Claire. She'll be 6 months old pretty soon, and this pandemic has kept me from getting down to see them. They live in Florida, so hopefully vaccines are coming, and I'll get to see this little cutie pretty soon. Okay, so you guys will see me next time, and we'll do something or other. Okay, have a great week.